Let's lay out the garden and prep the beds. What a huge difference just a few weeks away in a garden during spring times can make. Look around, the grass has grown like crazy, the leaves are out, the apple trees are flowering, the hedgerow is in full on swing, and we are in a huge struggle to finally continue with the garden. We were away on a trip to Lapland, which was absolutely amazing, but of course it took some time out of our gardening. But now we're back and are eager to get going again. However, there is one unfortunate and sad news, which is that the apple tree which I built the gate next to and I wanted to cut away the cherry plum to give it more light, has actually died over the winter. I wasn't too sure. I thought it would come through in springtime, but now it's absolutely clear it's completely dead. But of course that's the way it is. And now I'm very happy that I didn't cut the cherry plum, because now there would be a huge gap and no tree whatsoever. So it turned out well in the end, and now I'm just gonna remove most of the limbs but leave the trunk as it is, because it's a valuable piece of dead wood here in the garden. There are already a lot of insects on the trunk itself, and I have seen a woodpecker fly away when I came here, so it's already a perfect habitat. First and probably most unexpected part of our garden layout is this last minute addition. An artificial pond. For a very special occasion we wanted to grow some water lilies in our garden, and since there is no brook or proper pond nearby, we decided to integrate a very small artificial pond in the garden itself. So this dugout part of the garden is actually absolutely perfect. A few days later the pond is already settled in very nicely. There is even a bit of water from the last rainfalls in it. But now it's finally time to reveal our garden plan. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our garden plan. We have been working on it all winter, and this is the final result. Obviously we are super excited about our first garden plan. Here on the one side we have the hedgerow, the wild hedgerow, and on the other side we already have trees growing close to it, and then nestled in between is our garden plot. While planning it, we divided it into 3 sections. The top section of the garden gets the most sun, so here we're gonna plant plants which just love sun. At the very bottom of the garden it's quite shady because there are quite a few trees and bushes, and so we're gonna plant plants here which really like shade or don't need so much sun. And then in the intermediate section of the garden, there it is a mix. There is quite sunny in the morning and it gets shady in the afternoon, or vice versa. And this is also where we're gonna plant plants which need kind of this in between. In the middle of the garden is gonna be a path around 80 centimeters wide. And then diverging from it there are all like small little paths that connect all the beds. For now it's time to implement it. The first order of business is actually to mow everything, because the grass has grown already like crazy. And then I'm gonna measure out and mark the whole plan for the garden using a chalk spray. It's really a cool feeling already walking on our future garden path. Now everything is marked out, and the next step is to take out the broadfork and loosen the soil within the beds. Since I knew that it's going to be a very challenging soil to loosen with a broadfork, I looked all over online and finally found a broadfork by a German company called Teradix, which seemed to be quite sturdy. This one has flat tins and they are anchored in a really solid tube of steel, so hopefully it should withstand that kind of a challenge, but we'll see in a minute. Now here I used to have a small garden patch with some forever kale growing in it. Didn't work out in the end because of snails. But you can see, although it's still quite a workout, it's much easier and much looser this soil already. Yesterday evening I had to work almost into darkness, but I finished to broadfork all beds and I'm super impressed how well it held up with this really tough and rough soil. I also unearthed a ton of bricks, quite literally, which used to be a garden path in my parents' old garden here, and it never had any problems even when I hit them with full force. So it's a really impressive tool. So you might be wondering why I'm even doing this hard work with the broadfork if I then put cardboard over the soil and compost on top where I'm going to plant our plants into it. Well, broadforking has many incredible advantages. By going really deep with those tins up to 30 centimeters and then pulling it back, you really loosen up the soil layers without turning them over, which you normally would do with a spade or in agriculture with a big plow. And this way the layers of the soil, which you can imagine like an upside down skyscraper with each layer having its many different inhabitants, this way the layers stay intact and all its inhabitants keep their, well, apartments in the end. Of course it's probably quite a rough awakening for them either way. You probably could compare it to an earthquake. However, this really, you know, gets them going, and this way the soil really gets activated. Of course, it's easier for air to enter, which also helps microbial life. It's also easier for water to enter it. For our future garden plant roots, it's easier to get deeper into the soil and get more nutrients this way. You also keep earthworm pathways intact, and not only that, you're making it easier for them to reach even further and to reach more parts of the soil and improving it. Now all the pieces are coming together. So I'm first taking apart those boxes, removing any plastic labels, metal fastenings, all of that, like so. Then I'm gonna take the cardboard and soak it in water. And once it's properly soaked, I'm taking it out and then I'm putting it on top of the garden bed. This I'm gonna do for the whole bed, one bed at a time. Then next there's gonna be the compost on top, and then also there's going to be the mulch on top. So, if we were wondering where we get our garden's compost from, this is it. This is our garden's very own fertility gold mine, which has been started by my parents literally decades ago. It consists of all the trimmings of the garden over the years, be it from old apple trees, cherry plums, from the hedgerows, brambles, clematis, and of course even grass clippings. And all of it has been collected and piled up in here. It's in a nicely shaded spot of the garden and it's always quite damp here, so perfect conditions. Once we knew that we wanted to start our own experimental garden plot, I knew it was time to break open our fertility gold mine here. So I came in, removed the top layer of branches which hadn't fully degraded yet, chip them up with the garden chipper, and this is actually the very mulch we're using on top of our garden beds. Now, with all the branches removed, it was really easy to access this beautiful compost consisting mostly of degraded wood. It is essentially woodland soil, which is the most resilient type of soil out there. And this is because it's full of lignin. Lignin is one of nature's most abundant but also most complex polymers, which on the one hand gives the soil structure. It absorbs a lot of nutrients and water, but on the other hand it's also home to many beneficial microorganisms. And I'm also leaving in all the bigger pieces, not fully degraded parts of wood, because it's already, you see, I can break it like this, it's really degraded. It really stores a lot of water in the soil, and that's a major thing for our garden because it's very exposed to the sun. It gets very dry during the summer, so I'm trying everything in my power to keep it as moist as possible. So our experimental garden plot gets the best start imaginable, and all of this with resources made and produced right here in the garden. All it took was just a few decades. Another beautiful morning here in the garden and only 4 beds left to finish. Finally finished. After a few days of really intense work in quite warm weather, all the beds are prepped now and are essentially ready to be planted. I really enjoy and I really love how the design turned out. It was already really promising on the plan itself, But of course, seeing it here in person now is something completely different. It really conforms beautifully to the contours of this plot and should give more than enough space for so many tasty plants to be planted and to thrive in. The process of making those beds, also making all the basic materials from wood chips to compost themselves, was of course very labor intensive, but I hope that all the labor we put into it now at the beginning will be saved in the end, because as it is planned, or at least I hope that it works out that way, is there shouldn't be any weeding or very little weeding to do over the year. This really dense and deep layers of mulch, compost, cardboard and then loosened soil below it should hold water very nicely, and paired with an automatic irrigation system we also shouldn't have to do any kind of watering. Other than that, of course, the main footpaths and the little paths in between the beds is still somewhat barren. However, I'm still pondering if we should leave some grass growing, which we mow every once in a while, or we put some more wood chips on it. One major structural element, which of course still needs completion, is our lily pond. This will get its own video because we are gonna make a whole beautiful wooden construction all around it, then hide the terribly ugly black plastic, and then of course also plant the water lilies in it. Yeah, so everything left to do for me today is to hope for a lot of rain in the next days, so everything gets really beautifully saturated and ready for planting in the next few weeks. See you in the next video, where we make it very difficult for snails to thrive in our garden.